So this was the first part of our event. And now let's go to the second one, which will be a very diverse panel. So yes, two women, two different languages, two different origins, two different generations, but the same energy. Laura Lumingu and Antoinette Daspremont-Linden will be interviewed by Pascal Brabant, Head of Communication at Euronext Brussels. May I also ask to all the other participants to, for the moment, close their cameras and micros? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. For this year's event, instead of having a keynote speech, we thought it could be interesting to have a double interview with two women who have different profiles but share the same challenges in their work life. So that's why we are truly happy to welcome our two guest speakers today. First, we have Antoinette Daspremont-Linden. Well, I think it's impossible to summarize her career in a few words. What we can say is that she's board member at BNP Paribas Fortis. She holds many other board member positions and has occupied many leadership positions in Belgium and abroad. And she also spent a few years at Stanford in California in the early 70s. Our second guest speaker is Laura Lumingu, a young potential who already has a rich career, mainly at KBC. She's currently a policy advisor, corporate transformation and innovation at KBC Bank. Also interesting to know, Laura holds a master in gender and diversity and has roots in Limburg and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So as Claire said, two very different profiles. Thank you both for having accepted our invitation. Antoinette, as an icebreaker and a way to introduce yourself, could you perhaps share some important takeaways or highlights from your career, but then specifically from a gender or diversity point of view?
Yes, thank you very much, Pascal. So I will tell you that my father, who was born in 1914, so a long while ago, strongly insisted his 4 daughters, he also had 2 sons, should benefit from higher education so as to ensure their independence. I hope I did not disappoint him by earning a master's degree in engineering in the top engineering school at the time. I was, and also by earning PhD in management a few years later. Stanford, you know, it was in the middle of the Silicon Valley. At Stanford, I was lucky to meet Bob Wilson, an economist who, by the way, received the Nobel Prize last year. I was only 20 at the time, and what probably astonished me is that he trusted me. So it emboldened me. In my department, there were 250 men coming from the top schools in the world, and 1 woman, myself. At Stanford, I also met a mathematician, Michael Mashler, from the University of Jerusalem. After returning to Belgium in 1973, I spent more than 15 years in a bank. When I arrived, there was only 1 other woman at a higher level than mine, and virtually none in tech, whatever the level. Michael Mashler was visiting and having dinner with us in Brussels, and he told me, why don't you take a PhD in order to broaden your perspectives? And 2 years later, I got a fellowship from the Industry University Foundation for 3 years, took a leave of absence, and worked very hard, I can tell you, on my PhD with 2 small children at home, and I had a 3rd child later. After my PhD, I went back to the bank and managed a project I really enjoyed on MOOCs when I was made aware of a position as professor in management at the University of Lille. I applied, got a job, and stayed for 20 years. I thanked Michael Mashler every single day of those 20 years for inspiring me to move. I was teaching accounting and finance at undergraduate level, with 800 students in front of me, and management computing at the master's level, and I simply loved it. To this day, I still do not know how I got to be on the first board I sat on, which was GBL, why I then was the only woman. What I can tell you is that all the top executives who interviewed me showed high interest in my qualification and experience in finance and tech, which they told me were rare in women of my generation. So my conclusion is, for you all, when someone inspiring suggests a move, don't miss the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. Laura, the same question for you, basically. How did you experience the question of diversity and gender in your career?
Thank you, Pascal. Well, for me, if I look back on a little bit more than 10 years of working for KBC, ranging from working in IT, digitization projects, and innovation and transformation policy departments, it really strikes me that the first 7 to 8 years, when I was from the age of 21 to 29, I was always the youngest in the team, and I did saw quite some changes in teams. And I think with the average age of mid 40s, I think generational diversity is a big challenge for the HR departments right now in the financial sector. Another thing that also strikes me, but a bit more hopeful, is that the last couple of years at KBC, I see more and more younger women breaking through the ceiling to higher management, working on transformation and innovation in the bank. These are really role models and very inspiring, and they are making me, how do I say it, not more ambitious, but more hopeful for my ambitions. However, a very few to actually none are colored like myself, but it does show that change is happening. It's going slowly, but it is happening. And I do think that, for instance, in entrepreneurship, I have the feeling that the space is going faster. During my career, I also started at KBC, a startup accelerator, and that was from 2017 to 2020. And there I really noticed a remarkable increase in the number of female founders in the community, and also those that have a diverse background. And I believe that they're focusing on fixing the organization, not fixing the women, it really accelerated the change. We were working on gender balanced pitch juries and boardrooms, raising awareness with funders who finance startups about unconscious bias, and having gender equal panels and spotlight time at events and in media publications. I think things like this can really make a difference. So I already saw a lot of diversity and gender perspectives in my short career, which is very interesting.
Thank you, Laura. Antoinette, as Laura said, change is happening, but there's still a lot to be done. What would be your one top advice for women starting their career today, or your advice for companies willing to improve diversity at their companies?
Okay, I should do a preliminary remark that it depends on the sectors, really. So this is a general remark. My first advice for women who start her career is to rely upon a mentor. I think it is really useful to find a mentor somewhere in the company and to rely upon her advice. And symmetrically, if you're stuck in a position where someone you depend upon does not support diversity, and if whatever your efforts, things don't change, don't wait forever until things improve. A mentor can then help you to make a change, knowing that this can be a real challenge. And as far as companies are concerned, I think the first move is to encourage awareness. The trend with regard to diversity in the company must be shared within the company and outside the company. I think Claire does that very well, so that corrective measures can be implemented in case it is heading the wrong way. I mean, at least people know the way it's heading. But I'm afraid a group attitude finally comes down to individual people. So maybe the promotion of diversity at every level of the hierarchy should be part of every top executive's objectives. If they believe in diversity, then let's go ahead with some financial incentives, just as it is the case for other objectives. Why not? And I must say, though, that I find that men are the first victims of cultural pressure. For example, when there are measures to allow for more flexibility for parents of small children, there is more pressure on men not to benefit from those measures than there is on women. I know a lot of young fathers who are highly qualified, highly efficient, but interested in participating in parenthood. So both end up being penalized, men because they don't allow themselves to take more time to play their role as fathers, and women because they could be perceived as dilettante. So I think a good example is Nordic countries. So that's my point of view in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. And Laura, what would be your one advice that you could give to a young starter today?
I completely agree with what Antoinette says. And for my experience, the main thing was also, what was and still is key for me for my career is having access to mentoring, not only from more experienced colleagues, but especially from managers. And for me, my previous and my current bosses, they make all the difference in getting me into projects and functions where I can focus on my strengths and work on my potential. I also communicate very openly with them about my goals and my ambitions, but also the insecurities that I have. And I always had the luck up until now that they are actively working together with me to reach those goals and work on my self-confidence. So I would say if you are starting your career, choose your boss, not your job. And if you are one of those managers, mentor, especially those that might have lesser privileges due to structural inequalities that are built into today's society. It might seem like a small step today, but it can make a huge difference in what the management of your company will look like in the future. So that was what I wanted to say about it.
Thank you. I remember last year's event with Women in Finance. It was held physically in a completely different pre-COVID world. This seems ages ago, and it shows how fast things can change when we are forced to adapt. My question is, do you see the confinement and the working at home trend? Do you see it as a threat, a challenge, an opportunity to advance gender equality? Maybe Antoinette, you can start.
Well, I must say, I personally see it as a great opportunity for women. Now, in this particular situation, it is difficult because mothers of young children at one point were on full lockdown with schools and daycare centers closed, no help from grandparents, and that was really a challenge. But I know that women are up to it because I hate cliches, but I have observed women are more task-oriented than presence-oriented. They have absolutely not 1 second to lose. So in addition, they are champions of multitasking. I'm absolutely sure about that. And they are used to highly challenging time management and asked to perform different tasks. So I think it's an opportunity for them. And in a company where the job does not require physical preference, of course, if it does, then it's worthless. When there is no possibility to telework, one could consider the amount of presence as a measure for the amount of work. And that is not so in teleworking, where the output is what counts. And it is extremely exhausting, I can tell you, to take care of young children. So in some culture, this could reinforce the tendencies to physically stay at work rather than managing one's time at home and participating in tasks that need to be carried out in a home with young children. So teleworking with an output-oriented objective makes people more equal. and women are pretty good at doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura, do you agree? And do you also see the confinement and working at home as an opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. If I look at myself, the morning rush and the evening rush, they are a lot less stressful. I have a 2-year-old running around. Luckily, daycare stayed open for me, so we had a lot of luck, and also working has become a lot more flexible. And I think this made work-life balancing less stressful for women. Because let's be honest, most of the moms, they do more family work. However, I must say that at my place, my partner equally shares the parent load, so I'm very lucky. But yeah, raise your hand if you have done some homework like ironing or cleaning up mess or putting dishes in the dishwasher when you were on mute during a meeting, or when you're in between meetings. I mean, if we were in the audience in the room right now, I would ask people to raise their hands, and I think a lot of hands would have been up. And this, voila, there you already see someone digitally raising their hands. I think this really makes a difference at the end of the day. When there's already some work done. But I do think there's also a downside to work being that flexible. If you are not so disciplined to keep strict work-life boundaries, like myself, you actually can end up working a lot more than you do when you go to the office. It is really too easy to keep on working when your kid is in bed, especially when all the social and external obligations fall away due to the confinement right now. So my me time transformed sometimes into work time, and in the long run, that is not healthy. You're taking up more work. So if anyone has had tips on balancing a high demanding job with a high demanding I am too when I say no toddler, but also trying to keep some me time, spending time on yourself, please share them with me. I'm still also looking on balancing that. I can use some good work-life hacks. It is still complicated, but I do think that working from home makes it a bit more manageable.
Thank you, and maybe we can share some tips in the chat box of this meeting. As a conclusion, we still have a few minutes. Laura, if there was one question that you would like to ask Antoinette, what would it be?
Antoinette, first of all, I want to say that I am honored to be sitting here digitally together with you, a veteran in the financial and academic sector, and to be given the opportunity to ask you the following question. What was for you a tipping point in time, like a moment when you began to feel more hopeful for women breaking through the ceiling in senior management positions and in boards in the financial sector? And were there some typical measures that you saw that were taken at a certain point in time that you believe helped that change? I'm really curious about it because I want to know, or let's say I want to recognize some sort of a moment in the future where I can be also hopeful on seeing more color in senior management positions and boards in the financial sector. So I'm wondering if you had like a moment in time that you saw women breaking through that ceiling, and when that was.
Well, I can tell you two things. I hated quotas. I thought it's so humiliating. I mean, I was really proud of my qualifications. I mean, I was the only engineer in my class, the only woman engineer. And so I thought how humiliating to need quotas to be in a board. But then thinking back to Stanford in 1970, I thought there were quotas in the business school, and there were more women and more people of color in the business school. And of course, it was tough for them to get in because there were many candidates, but they were pretty good. And that really was a life-changing experience. So I do think that, of course, it is a matter of generation. I'm afraid that people like my father, born in 1914, were rare. I mean, many friends of mine told me I would have loved to be a doctor, loved to be an engineer, loved to be whatever they loved to be. But their family didn't want to help them, didn't want to encourage them to do so. So I think to change that generation's quotas are necessary, I'm afraid. So between the time I left Stanford and the time I got back to, I left the bank and got back to business, there were 20 years, as I told you. And I did see an extraordinary change. I mean, there was much more neutral when you discussed with people. You know, they didn't stare at you like, what are you doing here? You know, so there was enormous change. And I think the change is still ongoing, thanks to people like Claire. And so I'm optimistic, but beware, it could go backwards. So stay vigilant. That's my advice. Thank you for the question. I'm quite honored to have a question from you too, because it is quite a challenge nowadays to be the only young person and young woman, and as you say, also women of color. It is a challenge. So I'm greatly admire you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Antoinette, if you had one question for Laura.
Well, I can tell you it's influenced by my academic experience together with my business experience. And so I'm going to ask you, at what age are going to teach your daughter to code?
That is a very, very good question. I think as soon as possible, because I really like that right now in schools, you already see that kids are learning it at a really young age with some sort of gamified little robots. So really, we are now actually in the process of writing her into applying for a school, and those things are already popped up and questions about it at school about how they are teaching kids also to code and be more aware of of the digital world. So it really for us it was really something that was a factor for me that is important to choose a school, because I really like it. We definitely need a lot more women to code, especially in the area. Right now I'm working a lot on data and AI, and there also, if you want AI not to be discriminating, it is very, very, very necessary that there's a diverse team working on that, so that we don't code in the bias that we unconsciously have in our heads into the system. So for me, it will be as soon as possible. And I already tried it with my sister. My half sister, she is 14 years younger than me, but there, unfortunately, it did not work. She did communication studies just like me, but lifelong learning, you never know. But as you said, it's really as soon as possible. It will be as soon as possible. And I think there, parents, the role of parents are very, very important as well. So maybe for the people that are working on getting kids to code, maybe also do more sensibilization on the parent side of things, because they have a big influence on what the kids are teaching. Great question. Thank you.
A lot more women need to code. This sounds like a great conclusion for this conversation, and we feel that you may have many more things to share, but unfortunately we are running out of time. I would like to thank you both. This has been very, very interesting and inspiring. I hope it was also interesting for our audience. And